Hey guys, just another 15-minute PowerPoint wrapping up today's PowerPoint stuff we couldn't get to in class. So the last couple slides, guys, one is on the continued economic transformation in this era. We call it Sunbelt migration, and basically you'll notice in the slide here you see let's see, there we go. Um, Sunbelt is a 15-state area stretching from Virginia to Florida and Texas to California. Essentially, guys, a lot of reasons for this, but one is after World War II, you had a lot of people moving away from this area. A lot of jobs were leaving this area, sometimes called the Rust Belt, the center of American manufacturing and industry. But there's a lot of factors other than that. One, air conditioning. We live in Corona. We live around here, and basically without air conditioning, like now and in the summer months, it'd be really tough to be comfortable. And so air conditioning came about in this era, and it did lead to tremendous growth. And Florida benefited, all the southern states, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California as well. Increase was twice that of the old industrial zone, so rapid increase post World War II. California became the most populous state by 1963. So that just gives you an idea, guys, of the tremendously rapid growth, especially in Southern California. Here we see again an advertisement for air conditioning. You see the lady. I don't know if that's a lazy eye or if it just this picture's pixelated, but you see the friends coming in with he's hot, and there's the air conditioner cooling off the house. These guys in a full suit, and he's comfortable. Another thing that attracted people, guys, was the jobs. Wartime industries located in Southern California, located in Texas, located in Florida. Later on, we'll see a lot of industry in Seattle as well. But the main trend here was the Rust Belt or Frost Belt to the Sun Belt migration. Aerospace industry throughout Texas and Florida, even in Southern California as well. Manufacturing. Here we see the decline since 1950, steady decline in manufacturing. A lot of reasons for this, guys. A lot of American manufacturing has been outsourced in the 20th century. That means jobs are going other places because labor is cheaper in other places, and businesses, multinational businesses, want to make more profit, so they outsource their labor and their manufacturing to other places. But also, it's been a general trend of the 20th and 21st century, more service-based industries. We'll talk more about that when we get to the 1970s. Let's finish this one off by talking about culture. This was seen, guys, in the American Century clip. They talked a lot about television, even the example of Einstein watching TV and loved that show, our show of shows or something like that. Again, TV emerged during this period, not surprisingly. Again, radio for a long time, guys, was the only real entertainment medium to reach American homes. But once you have the television, guys, it's still a big draw for us. I mean, as much as I would admit, like, yeah, I don't watch that much TV, I kind of do, whether it's, Netflix or things like that. But before we had all that stuff, guys, TV was the only thing. And yeah, we did have TVs like this where you had to come up and turn the knob. And yeah, as kids, we did sit way too close to the TV. Really shouldn't have. But we don't, notice nowadays we might have a 16-inch flat screen on the wall versus this little 19-inch black and white. And again, I told you guys this, my TV at home when I was a kid looked kind of similar to that, kind of sad. 90% of American homes had at least one television by 1960. That goes to show you guys. I mean, that's kind of the same thing as nowadays with regard to like computers and, things of that nature, and cell phones and all that. So, again, as we have more TVs in the homes, we're going to have more people watching them per day. Again, more programming as we go through. I told you guys, joked about having only 7 channels when I was a kid. Now we have a wealth of television. And there's even a song, I think, by Dire Straits in the 80s, guys. It was something like 57 channels and nothing on. It's kind of, if you've ever flipped through cable and, you can't find anything good to watch, that's kind of the joke about television sometimes, because you just want to sit down and kind of edge out to something. But, it's kind of still been a trend. It's easy, flip it on, you don't have to think, and, you can be entertained. So there's a big draw to it. TV programs tended to reflect the conformity of the decade. So I think this is one of the bigger elements that we've seen in other slides we talked about today in class that definitely reflected the conformity of the age. Leave It to Beaver, Father Knows Best, all kinds of television shows that basically were trying to model, that typical, I guess you have to say, white American lifestyle. Movies suffered just like nowadays. Less and less people are going to the movies. We wait till it's on Blu-ray. They didn't have Blu-ray back then, obviously, but again, TV definitely challenged the movies, and box office receipts declined. Mickey Mouse Club, even an avenue for what? Let's see, Justin Timberlake. I'm trying to think of any other famous stars off the top of my head right now. But here, guys, Annette Funicello became a famous star. Let's see out of this list if I could see anybody else. I'm not sure about this Jimmy kid. He looks like he's 40. But this, Disney for a long time, Mickey Mouse Club was an avenue for a lot of stars, and still to this day. I mean, the Disney Channel itself is a magnet for a lot of stars that do Disney for a while and then they go on to bigger and better things. Movie stars. Okay, James Dean, the icon, guys, of this era. East of Eden is one of many movies, and James Dean was kind of typecast. Honestly, he played the rebel in most of his movies, but definitely it resonated. It's kind of rare to see him in a tie. In most movies, you're going to see him in the leather jacket and a little bit dressed down. Certainly, Marilyn Monroe, icon, sex symbol, whatever a phrase you want to use for Marilyn, started making movies in the 50s and would definitely be that played that role, the blonde bombshell. And drive-in movies, guys. We didn't have, the multiplexes, IMAX, and all that stuff, surround sound, the crazy sound systems that the movie theaters have now. Basically, the drive-ins, guys, you put this little, on the post, you put these little things that hooks up to your windshield, and everybody in the car listens to it that way. Or nowadays, if if you've ever been to the movies, they do it through the radio frequency nowadays. But drive-ins are something that was a staple of the American, mid to mid 20th century, 1950s and beyond, and there's not, it's not the same experience just because movies are so much better nowadays, but definitely a part of American culture because not only is it the movies and stuff, but it's using your car, guys, getting to the movies that way. Just another quick story: when I was a kid, we would pile into my mom's car because the movies, some drive-ins would charge you by the carload, so we would literally have like 8 or 9 people in my mom's tiny Honda Civic, just because we could, and there wasn't. And you can believe it or not, there wasn't any laws against it. We didn't have seatbelt laws back then. Man, I'm feeling old as I lecture about this stuff. Rock and roll. We talked about it in the American Century clip. They did a good job of it. Basically, a derivation of African American blues. Started off with African Americans, getting airtime and singing, and then a lot of white performers kind of borrowed it or stole it, however you want to say it. Bill Haley in the Comets and people like that. But certainly the star of this age, just like James Dean in the movie theater, would be Elvis. And we talked about Elvis in the American Century as well. They did a great job with this culture. So there we see Bill Haley in the Comets again. Rock Around the Clock? I think that might have been his, but maybe it's another one. But definitely famous in this era. And then you got Elvis. Okay, 1956. Rock and Roll to the Masses. We told you guys a story about the Ed Sullivan Show and what happened with Elvis on there. But certainly, Elvis was an icon. Elvis was an icon even when I was a kid. He died, I think it was a drug overdose in 1977. But, no question, his legacy lived on, guys, throughout the 70s and 80s. And even today, I would say Elvis still resonates. I don't know. I'd have to poll you guys. You can tell me tomorrow in class if you want to that, no Elvis or yes, Elvis still kind of has, some sort of, what's the word for it? Just, like if you know who Elvis is and you kind of nod your head, that means his legacy and his, impact is still kind of there, even if we're not as, clear about him as we were, maybe 10 or 20 years ago. Some of my favorite performers of this era with classic rock guys, Fats Domino, and Chuck Berry. I love Chuck Berry. I used to listen to Chuck Berry when I was a kid and even throughout high school. All kinds of great rock and roll music from these two legends. Last thing I want to talk about with regard to culture, guys, is the Beat Generation. Now, the Beat Generation, you can compare them, guys, to the Lost Generation after World War II. There was that generation of writers, not Upton Sinclair, Sinclair Lewis, I want to say I've got Scott Fitzgerald to fit in there. That would be the Lost Generation in the 1920s. Very much disillusioned of society in the 20s with the materialism. And the Beats were, in a lot of ways, like that. The Beats took it a step further, though. They were, I would say more of a cultural element than just a literary element. Alienated young men, sometimes women, but mostly men, began in Greenwich Village, which is still a center for culture and arts and poetry and things like that in New York Um, the beatniks, they rebelled against the era, which we call an era of conformity, that we've kind of talked about in previous slides, and we'll continue to discuss a little bit. Conservatism of middle class. So the whole idea of the washing machine, or for a woman a car, their stove or whatever was a sense of their identity. We still have that to some extent to this day and age. I mean, think about brand names on jeans, or we gotta have. I know my wife has to have a certain type of purse, and some of you girls I've seen. You guys have the nice purses and things like that. And not saying there's anything wrong with that, but when it becomes more an element that kind of dominates your persona, and it helps define you, there's a little bit there where it's like, we define ourselves. And that's kind of what the beatniks were saying, is they were kind of rebelling against that conformity. Some of the elements that definitely scared off conservative America, emphasizing alcohol, drugs, sex, jazz, Buddhism, and a vagabond lifestyle. I mean, just you hang your hat wherever. And On the Road by Jack Kerouac, one of the more famous beat artists, writers, and poets, was essentially the Bible for restless youth. It was considered an autobiographical work, kind of based on his own experiences. Certainly, there's a lot of graphic information in there about his travels that I can't really get into here, but certainly becomes a symbol for this, what we refer to as the Beat Generation. All right, guys, about 11 minutes. Hopefully, you guys can watch it tonight. And let's see if proof that you watched. I want to talk about the Cult of Domesticity a little bit. I want to talk about a magazine that I was a subscriber to, that really, even in the 2000s, guys, had me realizing that the Cult of Domesticity and its influence still exists in our day and age. So ask me about that tomorrow. All right, guys, have a good one.